Welcome to the Empowered Women Show, inspiring women with small voices but big dreams to step up and fulfill their extraordinary potential. And now your host, Casey Lightbody.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Empowered Women Show. I'm your host, Casey Lightbody, and today's guest is YAMINI Toohey. Known as Yamini, she is an educator, speaker, business owner, and 100% authentic global woman revolutionary with a career background that spans continents, UK, India, US and Australia, and industries including education, healing, retail and coaching. Yamini embodies a woman committed to living a revolutionary life. Through coaching, speaking and live events, Yamini works with global women entrepreneurs to revolutionize their business and their lives. She is a lady after my own heart, and I can't wait to dive into her story today. And it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Yamini to the show today. Yamini, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Casey. I'm really appreciative of this opportunity to be part of the Empowered Women Revolution and to be here today talking with you. Really excited. Thank you.
I can't wait to dive in. You know, we've chatted a couple of times offline, Yamini, and your story is just so inspiring. I love your brand, Global Woman, and I can't wait to dive into that and hear more about your vision for that. But before we do, I'd love to go back in time a little bit and just really share with our listeners the journey that you've been on, both from a personal point of view and from a business point of view, to get you to this point now where you've launched Global Women.
Okay, so I started as a Catholic school teacher. I went to a Catholic university and did the very traditional path, and ended up teaching little 6-year-olds, and that was fantastic. But it soon became apparent to me that that structured environment didn't suit my nature, and I sort of stuck it out for a few years to mainly please my parents. But then I just couldn't do it any longer. I couldn't sacrifice, the soul or the calling, and so I resigned. And like life is, you kind of go on different journeys, and I just found out that I was really good at coming up with ideas. So that was kind of, and like all good entrepreneurs, I'd come up with a lot of ideas, and, some worked, some didn't. They're all refinement in the journey. I've done lots of different things. I've had my own business. I've worked as a educator, as a corporate trainer. I've written a sex column. What else have I done? I've worked as a body worker. I've lived in India in a commune. I've lived in America. So there's been lots of different elements to this journey that's got me to this point in time right now.
I love that, Yamini. And I think that's a really important point to raise, actually, is that so many women that I speak to say, well, I don't know what my passion is, and really what you've identified there is that you haven't been afraid to actually try all these different things to really identify what your true calling is, what your true passion is. And I absolutely love that idea and I really want to get that message across to our listeners, is that, in order, you may not have an idea of your calling straight up, but don't be afraid to just go out there and just try new things, test new things, see what you enjoy, and you really can start to actually feel into what you're good at, what you really find fun, and then hopefully your calling really presents itself to you eventually. So I love that.
And I would also say that, in that moment, that was my calling. Every piece of that journey was my calling in that moment. Also, one of the things I do is astrology. So astrology gives me that insight that, certainly things change, life changes. So every piece of that puzzle was part of my evolutionary journey to this point. So I can honestly say that everything I've done, whether I enjoyed it or not, was part of my calling in that moment.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love that. So, Yamini, I'd love to hear a little bit more now about Global Woman, because you've launched this, and I obviously resonate hugely with it, with the Empowered Woman Revolution. And so I'd love to hear, how did you tap into this calling, and what is Global Woman all about? What does it mean?
Well, Global Woman is really working with the woman who's had a particular life journey, and it certainly hasn't followed the traditional path. Even the traditional entrepreneurial path, it's probably been a little bit more bohemian. Maybe there's been some trauma in it as well, some stuff to work through. but she's a particularly passionate and powerful woman. So what I would say is Global Woman is for the woman who's ready to live a life of purpose, presence, and power. And she's ready to share that. She's ready to use her evolution to create a revolution around it and share it with the world.
Fantastic. So how did you come up with this? So what brought you to this calling?
I think strangely enough, the name Global Woman came to me whilst I was sleeping about 10 years ago, and that was a journey in itself because the .com wasn't available. The .com.au was. I got that straight away and, I kind of just sat on it. And then, 6 months later, I went to check again and the globalwoman.com was available. So I grabbed it. And at the time, I was running a completely different business, something completely different. So I kind of just had Global Woman parked over here, but it was always present with me. So I really think I had to do that other business to get it out of my system so I could really focus on Global Woman when the time was right, because I also believe that timing is everything. And, you have to wait for the right timing, but you shouldn't postpone either. So that's a fine balance.
That's a very interesting point, actually, which I'd love to come back to in a second. But let you finish the story around that.
So I finished my other business. I kind of took it to the final point where I could not take it anymore. I could not take it further anymore. I was done and dusted with it. So that was about 2.5, 3 years ago. I started transition. At the same time, I always had Global Woman coaching clients. In fact, my first Global Woman coaching client was a woman called Bunny Hoofstar in 2006. And she's built this incredible empire around hula hooping. So she was my first Global Woman entrepreneur client. And prior to that, she was working in the public service. But she's an incredible character, a really colourful character. And, of course, she found it really hard fitting into the square that is a traditional job. So she was my first coaching client, and it's been really amazing to watch her journey. So whilst I had this other business, I was always working with, 1 or 2 clients at a time over here. And then, like I said, about 3 years ago, the time was right. So ever since then, I've just been seeding it and growing it and getting clear on the message and what it is that I do that's really unique.
That's gorgeous. I love that. And I'd love to come back to those 3 P's that you talked about, Yamini. So you said power, purpose,
presence, and power.
And presence. Can you talk us through what you mean there?
Well, I think, what I realized from working with a global woman, a global woman is an archetype. She's a woman who has been through an incredible life journey. She's had the lived experience, put it like that. And from that, and what I notice is that most of my Global Woman clients have had a lived experience around where they've been through a very challenging time, such as stillbirth, heartbreak, divorce, health issues, the whole gamut of things. And from that, they've realised that they have a particular purpose, and they've been able to put the transformation into the trauma. So they're able to come out with something that's really empowering. And from that, they're very clear on their purpose. We're focused on building a powerful presence around that purpose. And then we, like I said, bring it to power, which is coming out into the world with it.
That's really interesting that you raised that, because I think I'd love to get your take on this, Yamini, too, is that you said that they've actually overcome some kind of trauma in one way, shape or form, and that they've actually transformed as a result of that. And now I think, specifically for my audience who are quite shy, introverted women, it's almost that they get to a point in time where it's almost like the bottom of the barrel, and then they realize this, and then they come up the other side and then blossom into something amazing where they can really find their voice to be able to create a business and life they love, So I'd love to get your thoughts on that. Do you really think that, in order to live a revolutionary life, you've really got to get to the bottom first to be able to then transform yourself?
I think you have to have the depth of experience behind your revolution. You have to have, and to take people through it, you have to have lived the experience. So I don't know. Bottom is very different for different people.
Obviously, yeah.
But I think the lived experience is a really important piece in that.
That's a great point. Yeah, yeah. I'd love to come back to this whole idea too that you raised, is that actually you listened. What I loved and what I heard in that conversation is that you actually really listened intuitively to a point where you actually had to live through the one business and see it through to the end before you could actually really focus your efforts on Global Women. And I think this is a really important point too, Yamini. I'd love to get your take on it, is that at what point do you actually listen to yourself and realize now's not the time, versus those limiting beliefs that come up and actually stop you in your tracks and actually get you to, procrastinate? How do you differentiate? Because it seems that you really, really listened intuitively to having had that URL for 10 years and realizing that wasn't the time, and you actually had to live the journey before you could actually really focus on this.
Well, just coming back to that, I actually did. I'm now remembering that I did start a whole website and do everything. And then, halfway through the experience and having spent thousands, I realized I didn't know what I was doing.
That's quite familiar, I think.
So I did have it. There was an incarnation of Global Woman, and and that was I was going through a very a particularly challenging time in my life, and there was this other opportunity and whatever else. So I went, and the other opportunity in that moment seemed easier, and it was easier. It was much easier for me to build a business out of that than it was going to be around Global Woman. And I think one of the reasons is because the tools that I needed for Global Woman weren't quite available yet. So now the tools are, in terms of the online tools. So, and what was your question again about, how do you know if you're procrastinating or timing? Well, yes. I think you just really have to pay attention to what's happening, what's being reflected back to you. And I think you have to pay attention to what's keeping you up at night or waking you up at night. If there's a real calling, to move forward with something, I think that will wake you up in the middle of the night, and you won't be happy until you've followed that bliss, so to speak.
That's so true. You know how often I hear that, and it's me, people say to me, I don't know how you can get up at 4:00 in the morning, Casey, and work. And I was like, it honestly doesn't feel like work to me, because I would happily get up and just work. And before I know it, it's the kids are getting up. I don't know where those couple of hours have gone in the morning, but it's just because I'm really doing what I love. And I think that's actually so important, is that really so being mindful, I guess, of really what's really lighting your fire, and then following that, I think, is a really important thing.
And I think, I think it's Danielle Laporte talks about it. It's like, look at who or what you envy, and that can be a really good reflection about where your calling is. And if I'm getting triggered by someone, I really have to look at what's triggering in me, because there's a clue to what I'm not owning in myself, and that's what I pay attention to.
Yeah, that's really good. And I was listening to something else, and I can't actually remember where I heard this, but I was listening possibly to a podcast, and they were saying how do you really identify what you're good at and what your unique strengths are. And I think this is really an important part too, Yamini, is that really figuring out what you're good at is what comes effortlessly to you. What is the thing that actually you can do and the time flies, and I think that's a clear indication that you're actually working within your strengths and your skills and your unique gifts, and possibly that's your calling. But also at the same time, what are you resisting? And I think that's where you said around the whole idea of envy as well. It's like, what are you, like, I love that concept of what are you actually resisting? Because if you didn't care about it, you wouldn't be resisting it, right? And then it's almost like, well, what are you, if you're resisting it, that's possibly maybe outside the realms of your comfort zone, but it's something that's really, you're obviously interested in some way, shape or form, that you are actually paying attention to it, but just in a negative way.
I think it's really important. One of the things I did at the beginning of the year, I made a commitment that each day of 2015, I would do something new. whether big or small. And I write it down at the end of, before I sleep, I write down in my journal what that big or small thing I did each day was. And that's really helped me stretch that, to reduce the resistance. And it's really helped me take on new things with an adventurous spirit and to reduce fear, because I think especially, I see it in female women entrepreneurs who are shy and introverted, because I'm a social introvert. So one-on-one I'm fantastic, but in a group, and, that in a way that's why I never went down the traditional job route, because I actually, for an introvert, that traditional organization is painful, It's not. So you have to be, the whole success model is geared towards being an extrovert and being able to blow your own trumpet. And none of those things I could do in that model. So going back to, writing down something that I do small or big each day that is new has been fantastic for me.
That's phenomenal. I'd love to dive into that a little bit more, actually, because I was actually reading, there's a guy that's just done 100 days of rejection, and he's just published a book, Zhang, or I can't really pronounce his name, but it was so interesting because he did this because he had this massive fear of rejection. And so he set some goals that he would actually go out and purposefully try and be rejected 100 times in 100 days, which I thought was phenomenal. And now he's spoken in TEDx. He's got a book published all around his learnings around that. But I'd love for you to share that a little bit with us, because I think this is really important for our listeners, Yamini, is that it's actually those daily action steps out of your comfort zone that are so important. And when you look back, you actually will see how far you've come. And so 365 days, that's a massive, massive commitment. But how amazing of you, and congratulations. I just think that's just phenomenal. I'd love for you to share a little bit about that with us.
Well, yeah, thank you. So I just, it's interesting because working pretty much from home, even though I work with a global team, I'm pretty much at home. So I noticed that at the end of the day, before I would sleep, I would reflect back about what have I done today? What have I achieved? And I couldn't always answer that every day. And I didn't like that. I really wanted to know that I could go to sleep that night knowing that I had done something new. And that was my reasoning for devoting 2015 to it. So it can be something as small as talking to someone I don't know, or doing a new exercise with my trainer, or talking to Casey from Empowered Women Revolution when I'm really nervous. It can be playing with makeup. It can be a whole range of things, but as long as I'm doing something new each day. And then I write it down and I keep building on that muscle. So it's been revolutionary, I would say. And I think, revolutions come from, some revolutions happen overnight, but I've researched a lot around social revolutions. But they have a really, for a revolution to be successful, it has to have a really, really good foundation. And you have to know how to manage hope, once you've launched. So this, to me, is my foundational practice, is taking on something new each day.
That's incredible. I love that. That is just, if anything, that is absolute gold that you've just shared there, and I just love that. That's just really, really incredible. Thanks, Yamini. Now, I'd love to ask you what it means. We talked about you having got out of the corporate environment, and I can totally, totally resonate with that as an introvert myself. And blowing your own trumpet in a corporate environment, I just couldn't get it. I hated every moment of that, And so I'd love to know what being an entrepreneur really means to you. Now that you've, taken that plunge and started several businesses, on your own, what does it really mean to you?
It really means that I can give full expression to my creative thoughts and endeavors, and I can bring that to life. I can bring that to its fullest expression and highest expression, and I can take that to the marketplace, and the marketplace will respond to me, and I can choose to live life on my own term and in my own way without having to compromise that, without having to compromise my creativity or my uniqueness. And, I think one of the things that really drove that is that, I'm one of 8 children. I look really different from the rest of my siblings. So it was embedded early on in me that I was different. So, being perceived as different it's not always a great thing. So I never felt like I fitted in. So I was really clear to me that I had to create something for myself that I could feel at home within myself. And I wouldn't be sad or, just, I think those sort of environments didn't nurture me, and it led to depression.
That's another great point. I think, it really is, it is entrepreneurship. I mean, it's certainly no easy feat. I think being employed is certainly, I feel, an easier route to take. If anyone had told me when I launched my first business what a personal journey I'd be on, let alone a business journey, I'm not sure that I certainly didn't expect that, and I think it's, as you mentioned, it's just a great avenue to really be able to express your uniqueness and really be able to nurture your own creative soul, I think, which is really, you're in charge of your own destiny, really, and so you really can design a life and business that you really want, so I think I love that. So I mentioned challenges though and it's certainly we have our ups and downs along the entrepreneurial journey. So can you share with us, I know it's probably quite hard to pick one, but do you have one specific challenge, Yamini, that you can share with the audience and really share the lessons that you've learned as a result of that challenge?
A challenge now or from the past?
It doesn't matter. One that just really stands out, I think, from you being along the path of the entrepreneur.
I think postponement was probably my greatest challenge. And a few years ago, I was in a relationship, and I actually wrote a blog about this. But I was in a relationship, and it was a very big love of my life, and the relationship ended. And I was in a complete mess. But, at the same time, because I had this relationship, and at some point it was, it was a distraction because I couldn't, and I didn't want to give my business my total attention. I had a nice lifestyle and everything was kind of ticking over, but, I just didn't give 100% to my business. So suddenly the relationship ended, and I remember spending about 3 weeks on the couch drinking vodka and feeling very sorry for myself until one day I woke up and I thought, why on earth am I pining over a man who clearly doesn't want to be with me? And that was my wake-up moment, and I realized I just had to get on with it. So the postponement that I had been living with had disappeared like that. And that was probably the biggest turning point of the last 2.5 years, 3 years. And from that moment on, I just got on with it. I thought, okay, I can do this. I can do this. And I pulled myself together, picked myself up, and took the necessary steps to start making it happen. So that was, yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I think, I'm not sure, again, whether there has to be a moment in time that you actually get to a point where you actually really have to pull it together, So I'd love to dive into that a little bit more, really try and understand. So when you talk about postponement, I mean, so when you weren't giving much to your business, what did it look like? What do you mean? What do you mean by that? Was it?
It was just kind of like I wasn't growing it, and things were coming. I wasn't actively engaged with my business. I was kind of, things were coming through. I wasn't out there networking or putting myself forward.
Yeah.
And I wasn't fully engaged with it at all. In fact, I would say I wasn't fully engaged with my own life. There was a big projection on the man that he was going to take care of me or do whatever. Right. And hence the postponement. It was always like, oh, well, there'll be time and blah, 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 whatever story I was telling myself about the reason I was postponing. And that's not to take away that I did love him, but there was just a projection on this person that he was going to do something for me that I couldn't do for myself. And it was that get up and go moment. And I thought, okay, I'm not going to find myself in this position again. I have an opportunity. I'm a really smart woman. I've been through an incredible journey. And to not use that is a waste. And that's what I got. And I thought it was such a waste.
Oh, I love that. And so what's that really meant for you now? Really that turning point for you? I mean, what has that brought to you, apart from launching Global Women and actually getting it launched? What has that really meant for you?
It meant firstly taking care of all the areas in my life where I was hoping he would fix. So money, and I had let myself go physically, so I engaged a personal trainer, and I got that whole thing going. It's required that I've invested in my professional development and doing certain courses. So in a way, I upskilled. I already knew a lot, but I realized I had to really invest in premium trainings to be a premium brand in the market. And that's how I see Global Woman moving forward.
Gorgeous. Well, I was actually going to ask you that. That's a great segue into my next question, actually. I mean, is where to from here? So what can you share with us what's happening with Global Women, where you see it? I'd love for you to dive in and actually really share what revolutionizing your business and your life really means to you and how you can help other women like that.
Okay, so I've just started, we've had one last week. I've started running the Global Woman Entrepreneur Peer-to-Peer Day. So what happens is a group of entrepreneurs come together. They've all got a business, but they're all at different stages of the business. So some are at ideation, where they're just starting with the idea, exploring with it. Some are at scale, where they're scaling their business. And one of them was at her exit strategy. So this amazing group of women came together, and they had to bring their biggest problem to the day. And the what happened out of that was incredible, and it was great for the person who was at ideation to see, okay, well, I need to have an exit strategy, because I see a lot of women go into business and, they are full of gusto and enthusiasm and everything's fantastic, or it may not be, but they don't actually have an exit strategy. And I think at every stage of your business, you have a different exit strategy. So the Global Women Peer-to-Peer Days will be running regularly, and I hope to, be running webinars where lots of different global women entrepreneurs can come in and brainstorm their businesses and talk about how they can take it to the next level, how they can revolutionize it. Because I think sometimes when we're working in either solo or isolated, we don't get that input from other people that can really give us that momentum to revolutionize that aha moment, go, oh, that's what I have to do. And the collective wisdom of a group of global women entrepreneurs is profound. You've got all this experience in the room, and everyone's personal journey as well on top of that, and just magic happens and revolution happens. And also for those people who are afraid, I come across a lot of entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs who are afraid of going out there because it requires vulnerability. You have to, and I actually blogged about this week about how do you manage vulnerability as an entrepreneur, especially if you're an introvert, because once you go out there, you're suddenly visible, and with that visibility, there's vulnerability. So how do you manage that? So it's really about bringing women together to help them revolutionize their businesses and their lives from the collective wisdom of the group.
Oh my goodness, give me goosebumps. We speak in the same language there. I absolutely love it. Woohoo! Now, I would love to get your take on this, because I 100% wholeheartedly agree with you that, in order to revolutionize your business and really to be what I talk about, to finding your voice and having the courage to be seen and heard, there is a lot of vulnerability that comes with that. Yamini, having said that, I think it's so important in today's society to really come from a place of service and to really share your truth. I think it's a very, very noisy world online, and I think really if you can truly come in and stand in your own power and share your unique, real voice, people actually resonate with that so much, and that really sets you apart from the crowd. Having said that, it takes a lot of courage. You do need to be vulnerable. You've got to be prepared to show your flaws as well as your strengths. And I'd love to get your advice. And what would you say to women really feeling that now and listening to the podcast now
about managing vulnerability?
Yes.
What I discovered is that there's two types of vulnerability for an entrepreneur. There's passive vulnerability that comes with you feel like you have no choice, and there's active vulnerability where you look at what the risk involved, And based on the risk, you make a decision to be active, to take the step. So there's power in that vulnerability. But I think when we don't even calculate the risk, when we think it's all too much and I can't do it, that vulnerability of powerlessness. I mean, I don't want anyone to live a life where they're afraid of stepping out into the world because they're fearful vulnerable about what other people might say about them, and that comes with the visibility, especially when they're still telling their story that involves trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people have to know that nothing is personal for a start, and I certainly know that myself. And secondly, to have some a sense of what it is they want to disclose as well. I mean, I think it's important to have boundaries around
Absolutely.
that. Yeah, and just to not get engaged with people who are going to be attacking you, because there's always going to be someone who doesn't like you or whatever else. So you just have to have a really good sense of self-worth and boundary, and take care of yourself. I mean, I do. I have people who make sure they're in a way the gatekeeper. They make sure I don't see stuff that doesn't serve me.
That's right. Yeah. And I think that's what's so important, and what I love that you're offering with Global Women, Yamini, is that whole idea of collective wisdom, but also having this support network around you that can protect you, like to really kind of buoy you up in times of, they can be your biggest cheerleaders, but they can all, I talk about having pom-poms and tissues, so they can be your biggest cheerleaders, but you can also have someone that can really have your back, through the tough times too. I think it's so important as women, and particularly, sensitive, shy, quiet women, I think take things on quite personally too, so it's a big step up to really to own your voice and be prepared to step into the spotlight. It's a big thing, but if you're so passionate about something and you do want to start this revolution and create a business, whatever that is to you, I think that's what's necessary, but you need to honor who you really are too, and have the support network around you,
And also, I mean, I think to have that in your heart, and you feel like you really have the passion to do something, and to not live that. Actually, the man had said to me once that you do not want to die with a song left in your heart. And I thought, actually, that's really, really beautiful, because it's, that's what I want to say to those women, all those women out there, or anyone out there who's got a thing, a passion, they think it could be a business, they think it could serve someone, to express it, to do it strategically, not to do it in an ad hoc way, but to, work with a consultant or a coach, and to do it strategically, to look at the viability of it, and to explore it as thoroughly as possible, to identify, could I take this to market? So you don't have any story about it at the end of your life, or a what if I'd done that, or have not any what ifs.
Well, that was what pushed me, I was like, this is too important not to do, I can't go to my grave with what if I didn't do this? And I think that's the thing that pushed me, so I can totally get that. And I'd love to touch on this a little bit more, because I think you and I think very similarly around this whole idea of collective wisdom, Yamini, and I think it's so important for women to really see the power in collaboration, and to really be able to recognize that the sum of the whole is always greater than the sum of the parts. So I think when we come together as women, we really are so much more powerful as a force to be able to actually impact and make positive change in the world. So I'd love to get your take, having run these peer-to-peer groups, which I think is a fantastic idea. I love that. Is really your learnings, and can you share like a story that's come out of that? Which, I mean, you touched on it a little bit with someone that's in the idea stage, and really recognizing that they need an exit strategy. But is there a specific story that you can share around that? Perhaps a personal story that you've come to realize how important this really is.
The peer-to-peer day, or
the collective wisdom, the whole idea of collective wisdom and how important it is.
Yeah, it was interesting. One of the women at the peer-to-peer day has had this website for 6 months, which she hasn't launched. And I've been working with her, and it's like, just launch it. She's completely stuck in perfectionism. And so at the day, she had to tell everyone she's got this website, and she hadn't launched it. And the collective wisdom of the group was like, launch it. Start before you're ready. What are you afraid of? So I think having had the lived experience really supports those women. Well, it supports all of us, but the collective wisdom, the lived experience reflects to women earlier on in the journey. Do it. It's okay. You won't die. It's not the end of the world. Do it. We've walked this path. You'll have learnings. You may not walk a straight path. It may take you in all sorts of places, but do it. Because the collective wisdom of the group will say, you're safe. We're here. You've got a group.
So I'm just interested, so with this woman, because you'd been working with her and she still hadn't published and she'd been sitting with it, and then she came to the peer-to-peer group and, you know, the power of the group, and they all came together and said, just launch it. So has she launched it now? I'm dying to know.
She's 98% launched it. She's
awesome.
I met her earlier this week and we're just doing a tiny couple of things, but she's ready to launch. Yeah.
You see, that's fantastic. And I mean, that just really is proof, you know, that it's just, it really does, there's something in the power of coming together that really allows women to have the confidence to take that next step, right? You know?
So just to go, I think just thinking about this particular person, the group, the collective wisdom reflects to the group, to the individual, it's possible. So the individual is thinking it's impossible, but the collective wisdom of the group is going, it's possible. And that's what's really beautiful, especially in seeing it play out with this particular woman.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that. So, Yamini, I'd love to ask you, do you have a specific business or life quote that you actually live by on a day-to-day basis, and why?
Well, I kind of have a lot, and I was thinking about this, and my favorite quote ever is creativity is the greatest rebellion in existence, and that was from my India days. But I was reading a great article with Amy Poehler in Fast Company last week, and I just love what she's doing with her creativity, because the global woman is inherently a creative woman. And I just love, like, she's, you know, obviously a comedian, but what she's done with that and how she's been able to use her power to create something much bigger than herself with her Amy Poehler Smart Girls website. So she has, and now she's gone on to all sorts of different tangents. And she had this quote, which is, you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And it goes back to just that person who was afraid. You have to, it's not a good enough excuse to not launch because you feel uncomfortable. Just do it. So that's what I've been really sitting with, because, you know, I still get anxious and uncomfortable and what the hell am I doing and all that sort of stuff. And that's my mantra, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. So that's for this week.
I love it. Thank you very much. I think that's gorgeous. I'm sure I actually put that post up on my Facebook page not so long ago too. So I think I'm a big fan of that quote. Yeah. And so in terms of, you mentioned how, you're really inspired by her, but is there a specific, and there's so many amazing women doing amazing things in the world, but do you have a specific woman that really stands out to you, Yamini, that you can share that really inspires you, and why?
I was thinking about this. I mean, I love Gala Darling. I think she's amazing. And so I found that there's a group of women women entrepreneurs that I love, like Gala Darling from, the blog, Sophie Amoruso from Nasty Girl, Diana Vreeland, what's her name? Diana von Furstenberg, the one who, she's, and there's another woman, Elizabeth, someone from she created this blood thing called Theranos. She's revolutionizing how blood tests are taken, so she's incredible. Yeah, she's amazing. She's like 31, college dropout, amazing. Her business is valued $1 billion. So she's like, incredible. But the one who I really love right now, what I identified about the women entrepreneurs I love, is that they've all led really interesting lives, and they certainly haven't been the straight and narrow. They've like really, and they're unusual women. But I love Sophie Amoruso, the woman behind Nasty Girl, because, she was this high school dropout. She's, what else did she do? She was living in a dumpster. She had all sorts, she was complete, she would have been at school, I think she was undisciplined and not well behaved, and she didn't tick any of the boxes of being a good student. So hence the reason why she dropped out, and she was dumpster diving and like really wild stuff. And then one day she had a job. She had to get a job for health insurance, and she got some job, and she started selling. She stole a book actually, which she then sold on eBay. In the early wild days of eBay, she sold this book on eBay, and then so out of that, she realized she loved selling, and she had this thing, and she could write words and blah blah blah. So she started selling vintage clothes. So like 10 years later, that thing that started out on selling on eBay is now America's fastest growing retailer for women called Nasty Gal. So that is incredible, and she's just done it all initially on her own with a small team, and it's just grown and grown. So I think she's a really great example of someone who's didn't do, like, early life didn't look fantastic. She struggled and she was unhappy and she was into all sorts of stuff, and she just one day found her thing and went, I'm going to do this. This is it. Isn't that amazing?
It's an incredible story, and I love hearing that because I think it's so, what you've pointed out there, I think, Yamini, is that, as you say, you can tap into your calling, whatever path you've taken. It doesn't have to be one set way. I think you've got to just be open to trying new things. And I mean, she sounds really adventurous and, out there and trying all sorts of things before she could really tap into what she's passionate about, and then just going for it, So I think that's really my takeaway from that too, is just taking the bull by the horns and just really going for it.
And she still does all their social media. They've actually she's opened up bricks and mortar stores now in LA and I think in Santa Monica, but she still does all their social media, and she does. So if you want a masterclass in how to do social media and engage, follow Nasty Gal and Sophie Amoruso.
Awesome. Great tips. Thank you. Thanks. That's awesome. And now to wrap up the interview, which has just been the best fun ever. So thank you so much. But I want to talk a little bit about female entrepreneurship, because you and I are both in the space, and we've probably touched on it a little bit during our chat today. But what for you, Yamini, do you think is the most significant barrier to female entrepreneurship today?
I was really reflecting on this, and I think the time is ripe for anyone to be an entrepreneur of any scale. It depends on how big, small you want to play as an entrepreneur. And I think the biggest challenge for women is, there's all the, access to startup funding and whatever. But I just think it's themselves. If they're that fear of holding them back, that they can't do it. Just get out there and do it, or at least explore the idea of doing it, rather than, oh, I had an idea and I didn't explore it. Just explore the idea. There's all the tools out there. If you don't know how to explore an idea, look up YouTube, just Google it. There's so many things you can do. And just start with something. So I think the biggest challenge that women face is an aspect of themselves.
So true. And you know what? That brings us really full circle. I love that, Yamini, because, as you shared within your story, is that you have not been afraid to try something new. You've explored stuff and then you've gone with it. And I think for me, that's been the biggest takeaway today. It's just been, if it's one message that I can really share with my listeners again, it's just get out of your own way and just explore things. Start to get to know yourself. You'll get some amazing insights as you go, both about yourself and about what you love to do too, So it has been incredible, Yamini. Thank you so, so much for your time. Honestly, what you shared has been absolute gold today. And I'd love to send our listeners to your website. So where can we find you online?
You can find me at globalwoman.com.
Nice and easy. That's fantastic. Thank you so much again, Yamini. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Casey, and thank you to your wonderful community. And I'm so excited about the Empowered Women Revolution. Bring it on.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye. And that wraps up another episode of the Empowered Women Show. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And if you have a chance and you enjoyed this episode, it would really mean the world to me if you would head on over to iTunes and leave me an honest rating and review of the show. That way, you'll help boost rankings and really shine the spotlight on these amazing women guests. You'll find the link in the show notes over at www.empoweredwomenrevolution.com. Thank you so much and see you next time.